Yes, please.
Okay, so our project was between Access Line and CMHA Niagara. And Access Line is the mental health and addiction contact. What's the full acronym Access stand for?
Mental health addiction access.
So they provide phone service across Niagara for adults looking for mental health and addiction services. They have service agreements with over 16 different agencies and all their programs underneath. Plus, they have information on all the other social services in Niagara. So they're spread across Niagara, as are we, CMHA. So the title of our project was Improving the Use of Access Line by Redirecting CMHA Referrals. So if you go to the next slide, to get to know our team, we had a nice section of team members across Access Line and CMHA. So we had myself as team lead, we had frontline, including reception, who often are the first point of access at CMHA. We had frontline from Access Line, which are first point of access on the phone. And then we had frontline face-to-face counselors from CMHA. We also were fortunate to have Vicki as our data person and Joy, who does quality work for us at our agency. And the next photo is us in real person instead of dog form. And we were celebrating when we were looking at the PowerPoint on Friday. So that's just us toasting quality. Now, if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about why we picked this as a topic for a quality project. And what we noticed was after we eliminated a couple of intake positions at two of our busiest locations, we did a new approach to intakes and referrals. And what we found was it was inconsistent. It depended on who the person spoke to at the time, whether it was by phone, in person. And we were probably taking on more referrals than we needed to, and not necessarily linking up exactly with the service that would be most beneficial to the person. And this was happening while the Access Line was trying to gain ground in being that referral source and connecting place across Niagara. So our thinking was centered around the fact that we realized that our attempt to do this changed intake process had missing pieces to it, and at the end, clients weren't getting properly served. So if you go to the next slide, it talks about what our problem statement ended up being. So since 2016, on a daily basis, prospective clients contacting CMHA Niagara offices are missing the opportunity to have Access Line match the client with the appropriate service to their needs. And our aim statement, which we are still in progress, was that by March 15th this year, 100% of CMHA staff who have client contact will provide potential clients, the opportunity for Access Line to match their needs with most appropriate service. So if you move along, we started troubleshooting what were the reasons for this, and that was our in real-time fishbone. And then if you go to the next slide, it's our more typed up one. And what we did is, this is the version we sent out to staff to have them vote on what they thought was the main reason behind this. And then we had if you go to the next slide, the Pareto chart, which identified these contributing reasons which we focused on. And that was that the awareness of CMHA services was high, and there was unawareness of what Access Line services actually provided. The other big piece was that a lot of clients don't have phones, and Access Line is primarily accessible by phones. So it's difficult leaving messages, trying to connect if we were attempting to make the linkage that way. The other part was that staff weren't given actual direct information on how it was expected they would use the access line. So what happened is if people were connected with CMHA, we often kept them connected instead of building a new link. The other process measure that we used, if you go to the next slide, was looking at process maps. And they were pretty straightforward. So this was our rough draft, and we included in our appendix a little more clear typed up one. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to move on and just briefly showcase in the next slide our beginning charter, which was not completely filled in as we were attempting to really figure out what we were doing and how this works. So this is actually the first page of our completed one, but this ended up being quite a few pages, so it's also included in our appendix. But I want to focus to the next slide on some of the change ideas that we ended up focusing on. So these are just a few of them, but that included, so I'm just going to flag the far right column. We focused on information, so access line presentation to CMHA staff at our branch meeting. And we also followed up with training to CMHA staff specifically on when, how, and why to refer to access line, and how to document so that we could track how this was working, and also how to troubleshoot certain situations that we picked up from learning what some staff thought were a barrier to refer to access lines. So the other thing we were really focusing on is when we were making referrals, wanting to make sure that we kept it warm. Because one of the pieces we were hearing from staff was, well, why would I refer them to somewhere else when I've got them in front of me? I thought this was no wrong door. So we kind of had to rebrand what no wrong door meant, and that was part of our education that you'll hear later because we measured on how that worked when we provided the training. So the other thing that we're still working on is just how to make the linkage, especially for people that may not have a phone. And so those are some change ideas that are still in process of being worked on. One of the things was, if I was to go back to our charter, our balancing measure was, if we do this right and increase the referrals, then the access line is going to be a lot busier, and the chances are that people are going to get more busy signals. So one of the things that we were looking at too is to implement live answer from the access line side. So hopefully that's making sense as I'm zipping through here. But the other thing, if you go to the next slide, is we're going to come clean here. We did not do formal PDSAs. Not that we're opposed to them, but what ended up happening was we, in our meetings, would discuss what we were doing and document it, but never actually pulled out the actual PDS form to state we're in this part of the cycle. So a lot of them were done manually, with the data collection, and it seems to be working, as you'll see from our measures. That's not to say we're opposed to using them, but we just honestly didn't do them, and we weren't going to fake it and throw it up here just so you could give us a check that we used the form. So if you move forward, I'm just going to have Vicki present on the data collection.
Thanks, Mary. So as Mary said, next is data collection. So in a nutshell, our outcome measures included our CMHA staff surveys and also tracking manually and electronically of referrals by access line and CMHA. Next slide, please. Our process measures include CMHA familiarity with access line and staff knowledge of what a referral is. So for example, when, how, and why to refer clients to access line. Also a note that our surveys did show us that fewer CMHA staff identified clients' lack of access to phone, access lines' inability to be reached by email, text, internet, and clients already being connected to CMHA and access lines' lack of availability to receive calls in real time as barriers to making referrals. So at the second survey, there were fewer staff that were reporting these barriers. And our balancing measure included the CMHA staff client survey. And just to note that our client satisfaction survey results remain at where they were at 95%. Another balancing measure that we had intended to use was reports of busy signals to Access Line, and we hadn't formally determined a way to collect that data, so we did not have anything to report on that at this time. Next slide, please. And so this is our first run chart, and this run chart is the referrals that Access Line received from CMHA. And as you can see, we do have a fair number of data points, which is great. And over the course of the project, referrals received by Access Line from CMHA seem to remain steady. On January 29th, this changed, and we think that it's likely due to our tested change ideas. So just to go over these stars, which are significant dates and our change ideas, December 12th was when Access Line attended a CMHA branch meeting, and they presented on Access Line to CMHA staff. On the 29th of January, CMHA staff visited Access Line to discuss data collection and statistics, just so that certain pieces could be improved. And then on February 5th and the 14th, that should be, we had 2 more CMHA training sessions on Access Line for those staff who could not attend the first session, which was on December 12th. And as you can see, we circled in our chart that a trend was beginning to emerge, which was exciting. Next slide, please. So to date, we have done 2 CMHA staff surveys. We did a comprehensive one in October 2018, and then a brief one in February 2019. We do intend to re-administer the comprehensive survey as a post-test later this month to determine how staff's use and knowledge of Access Line has changed and how it's impacting their use of Access Line, as well as their perceptions of how effective it is for clients. And on the slide is just a couple of our findings. We had really great response rates, and most people were familiar with Access Line, and 61% were extremely or very knowledgeable about Access Line, and the remainder were somewhat familiar. So it'll be interesting to see what our post-survey will reveal. Next slide, please.
So in the next slide, what was interesting is from the survey, we were hearing from staff about not knowing or not sure. So this supported our fishbone exercise as well. So we were getting 2 sources that were telling us that this was the problem, or a problem. The other thing that was giving us information that helped inform our change idea and what to target in our training was that when folks presented in crisis, could you go to the next slide? They didn't feel it would be appropriate to bring out this information and give the referral, and that, again, if there wasn't a phone, then that was a challenge, and if they're already connected, why would we refer them there? And no concern, again, that, well, if I have the person call, they're just going to get a busy signal. So that information, we brought that into our training and troubleshooted how do people deal with that if that shows up. So if you go to the next slide.
So out of these surveys, we did see some recommended changes that came through, and 30% indicated that CMHA staff needed more education about Access Line and when to refer, and 30% indicated that they would be more likely to refer if Access Line had a live answer. And these results confirmed some of our change ideas. Next slide, please. When we looked more closely at why individuals did not refer to Access Line, the most common reasons included: I prefer to refer clients to other CMHA services without using Access Line. My clients don't usually require referrals to other services. And Access Line can only be reached by phone, not by text or email. And based on these results, we targeted these reasons with our internal training efforts. Next slide, please. This is a direct comparison of the pre-post CMHA staff survey. And as you can see, with the post, we have seen an increase in how often clients would be referred to the access line. And these results may indicate a shift among those infrequent users to making more frequent referrals to access line, which is really promising. Next slide, please.
So we didn't, with this one, there was no significant changes between the two surveys. What we noticed too is that there was still a low number of doing supported calls, meaning make the call with the person at the time or scheduling an appointment. So that's all the information. I'm going to flag off this slide if you want to go to the next one.
So this is a chart for the results of a pre-post survey that we did for those staff that attended our access line presentation in December 2019. And as you can see, staff who attended the branch meeting presentation indicated that they learned a lot and were slightly more likely to refer to access line than they had been previously. And if you go to the next slide, this is a combination of the results of the other two access line education sessions for CMHA staff on February 5th and 14th, 2019. So we were able to hold those so that we could reach more staff, and the results were similar to the December session. Next slide, please. So pictured here is a run chart of CMHA tracked data that is tracked manually and electronically. The manual tracking captured referrals to individuals who walked into our service locations, and the electronic tracking captured referrals to access line made by service providers. And I won't go over the significant dates, as I already mentioned that in a previous run chart. But as you can see, there are a few points where there were some dips, and notably at Christmas time and around the holidays, we see a decrease in referrals. But after our sessions, we see a little bit of an increase. And there were 4 data points that looked like an upward trend was occurring, and unfortunately, we had a little bit of a drop. However, I should note that we are missing a little bit of data, and so once that data is collected, we may see the next data point that indicates an upward trend. Next slide, please. And this chart here is a comparison of the CMHA referrals to the access line referrals. And as you can see, there's a little bit of disparity. And after continuing to implement or change ideas, we have seen the gap become smaller. But the disparity can be explained by some clients might not follow up with access line after having been given access line information. And it's not possible for us to track that. And clients might not mention to access line that they were referred by CMHA. But with our meeting between CMHA and access line to talk about data collection, we looked at some strategies around being able to more consistently track that data. And next slide, please.
So if we just move on to our key overall challenges, we took challenges from both teams, and CMHA reports competing demands. So they have a lot of things on the go in terms of a move to a new location, some strat planning and new programs that they're offering, and partnerships that they've been involved in. So it limits the resources available. Similarly, access line also had competing demands and capacity issues, some unexpected agency events that arose, and kept our team members from moving forward in some of the tasks of the project in a timely way. Next slide, please. Lessons learned for both teams. The things that we're most excited about are excited about are watching the changes happening and seeing that impact as we went along. The factors that helped us move the project further and keep at a good pace was that we both have a mutual respect for each other as agencies and the services that are offered. So there was respect for the work that each does and believe that what we're doing on the client's behalf is beneficial and that it's moving in the right direction. The coaches were hugely supportive and helpful in moving us forward, giving us all the right pokes and prods as we needed them along the way, and helping us to use the proper tools to get the job done. And then we had a big team, which was awesome to get a good cross-section of perspective and give further insight into the problem and contributing factors.
And then the next slide. Oh, she did. Okay. What would you do differently next time? We wish we could start the project with what we know now about how to use some of the tools. We would like to have some more identifying the ways some of the tools can be worked with. Again, that will come with more practice by using those tools. Also having the opportunity to have more team members involved as well and getting their input and so forth. As well, Access Line would find resources to bring in additional database expertise as well. Impact on your organization beyond the project and project team. Basically, slowing down to fully examine the problem before band-aiding everything and band-aiding with a solution. Also, improve communication and collaboration across the two organizations as well is what we would like to do. Next slide, please. And then next steps to progress and improvement. Continue to have regular check-ins and regarding any changes of programs or anything like that. Ensure the communication is consistent. Maybe also pre-scheduled meetings as well. And also to continue to track data at CMHA admin as well by the frontline staff as well.
So our next steps also include administering a post-test CMHA staff survey. They're scheduled to happen in April. We will also keep working on the warm referrals and warm supportive calls to the Access Line. Additionally, keep working on getting appointment times in order to have those clients without phones are able to connect with the Access Line service. Keep working on getting the pilot to use an email referral to the Access Line, and also implement live answer at Access Line. And our last slide will be, what are we going to do to maintain or to keep sustainability with our project? So we've included ideas of monitoring the impact of the introduction of live answer on referral volumes and staff perceptions. We'll also monitor and improve data collection by both Access Line and CMHA referrals. We have planned for PDSAing and sustaining training for both programs, the Access Line and the CMHA staff, regarding referral process and appropriate documentation. So some of the things we'll do to continue the training is to continue to monitor videos that were incorporated for the orientation for new staff and on the Access Line, and to implement some more information and guidelines towards us in the training of the responders for that program. Also, we will plan to maintain regular meetings. We have scheduled for a minimum of once per quarter between the two organizations to keep the communication alive and going, and we will continue to review and compare CMHA and Access Line data regarding referrals, share the results of our projects alongside with our CMHA branch meetings and the Access Line staff meetings. And lastly, we'll look at the availability to replicate the improvement project with the Access Line other partners. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And Mary, appreciated your honesty about not using the PDSA forms. So Jenna is here, and she says you certainly did do PDSAs, maybe just didn't use the forms. So congrats on that as well. Some exciting work there. Any questions? Let's see any so far in the... Okay.